Welcome back to the Police Recruiting Show with Safeguard Recruiting. Once again, I have the CEO of Safeguard, Doug Larsen, on air now. And Doug, we've got a big topic to talk about today. I want to skip through all the other intros with the show because this topic is so important, but it's such a topic that very few people even understand or know. And that is the data you need to know and you need to have to make sure your recruiting is successful. And so, Doug, I know this comes into play when you onboard a new client. You ask them a series of questions. Can you kind of go through and talk to our audience about what type of information you need before you can really launch a campaign? Because it's not as simple as just launching a campaign. There's a lot of information you try to get from them to make it successful. So what does some of that look like?
Yeah, some of that, and we'll skip over the standard questions about what they're doing and how they're doing it. But we want to know how many people they need to talk to in order to get somebody to apply. And once they get somebody to apply, how many applications does it take to get somebody successfully through your process and get actually hired? And so some of this information is very important so we can figure out how many contacts need to be made and figure out where in that process we can help streamline it and make it more efficient.
So it's important to know how many they talk to before they before they apply, right? Because a lot of people will talk to a recruiter or email the website or talk to them at a job fair, but that doesn't necessarily mean they apply. Why is that number so important when it comes to the successful campaign?
Well, you've got all sorts of job seekers out there, and they're at different levels in their process. But it helps us too to understand what type of communication's working, what type of communication isn't working with this person, and how many people do you need interested in your one opening to successfully fill that opening? So we need to know that information up front of how many people you're talking to before you can get them to apply. And then at application stage, that's just one more step. We still got a lot of background. We got physical tests. We got a number of things that take place from there. And so we kind of need to know, one, interest in your department, conversion to applications, applications in your department, conversions to actual hires on the road. And so we can figure out what levels of ad campaigns you need, and what kind of a dollar spend, what kind of an outreach you need. It's all very important to be able to dial it in and make it most efficient for the department.
Now, you guys are unique, Doug, because, and we've talked about this before, like when you price out a campaign, you're not pricing out impressions. You're not pricing out branding. You will literally, you can tell them how many openings do you have, and you can price out what it costs to fill the openings. That's why you need the data. Now, you have some generic numbers because you've ran a lot of these campaigns, so you sort of know. But if they already know those numbers, that can be very cost efficient for them, right? Because you don't have to put as much effort into the front end to get the actual hires.
Yeah, exactly. We can dial a campaign in and get that dollar amount and get that budget set a lot closer if we know those numbers. And we can compare and give feedback based off what we're seeing around the country or within their region of what's successful and not successful, and what kind of percentage of conversion rate you should be having, or what we could drive it to if we made some tweaks to the process, or how you're approaching these recruits, or how you're following through with them.
Yeah, and you've got a seminar up at Safeguard Recruiting. It's $200, but man, it dives deep into this topic and others. It's your fully on-ground seminar that you give basically all these secrets away. And if I remember right, you went through a list there and you gave some examples. And so if a department, I'm just going to go by memory here off that seminar because I was at one of them and assisted with that. But it said that if you had 100 openings to fill, you started with the number of 12,000 interested people. And so you worked your way down with the numbers at this client you had. The 12,000 turned into a 25 or 30% conversion rate to applicants. And then the applicants, by the time they got through backgrounds and interviews, more people fell off. And it came down to you would hire 100 people off of 12,000. That seems like a big number, but that's why I think a lot of departments are struggling in recruiting, because if you don't understand that first number, even if it's a large number, 12,000 is a large number for 100 openings. Maybe it's not 12,000 for you. Maybe it's 10,000. Maybe it's 5,000. Maybe it's 20,000. But if you don't understand that front number and you don't understand how you're losing people along the way, you're never going to be able to fill your openings. And How many people do you talk to before they come on board with you, Doug, at Safeguard? Do they actually know that number?
Yeah, it's very rare for a department to know that number. Most departments know how many openings we got, what we need to fill, but they don't know working the other way of how many people do I need to contact to make this realistically us fully staffed. And you brought up our seminar and our webinar. We're willing to come out on location. We do that. We do the training, but I'd encourage people to get in and go through that video, and it walks you through a lot of these steps. It walks you through best practices, things that haven't worked, but it's very important to know going into a campaign of, look, I'm going to need to contact this many people. And you bring up a 12,000 number. It's not an overwhelming number. We can find those people. We do that all the time. And we can generate that interest in over a course of time, 6 months and a year in your department. It's what do we do once we have that interest in us, and how do we make that turn into the final product, which is an officer on the road?
Well, yeah, that 12,000 numbers probably seems crazy high to people if they're not if they're not doing their processes right, like billboard ads and bus ads and just general websites. You have no idea that number because you don't know who's looking at it. You don't know who's submitting their information for interest. There's one thing just to go by a billboard and go, oh, that's nice. It's another thing if somebody goes by a billboard and goes, oh, I'm interested. Well, then they don't have a way to even show interest off a billboard. So you run actual ads right on their phone, and you gauge their interest based on them giving you their information. And I just wonder, departments that are going to these traditional job fairs or things like that, when we say interest, we don't mean somebody walking by your booth. We mean somebody that stops and says, I'm interested. Here's my phone number and email and address, right? That's interested. You'll never get to 12,000 by those traditional methods. And I think that's probably one of the faults we're seeing. Those things are fine. You're going to get some people doing that. But the energy and the resources it would take to take that 12,000 number those ways, you could never do it. There's not enough job fairs in the world to get 12,000 people to give you their information. But as you said, on digital, you do that pretty easily. You've got clients now that you're getting 1,500, 2,000 a month to them, which are interested people, and they're converting that to hires on the back end. Do you not?
Yeah, we do that with a number of customers now, and it's a very good point. So what you need to look at too when you're running these campaigns, and let's take your bus ad for example, is how do I justify that spend with return? That's very difficult. But with a digital campaign, you can run it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the digital campaign, unlike the bus, is going to dial in and go and target the right people for interest in your department, whereas a bus is going to drive by a whole bunch of people and not have as much success. But we can take this digital campaign, we can drive it out there to the people that we think are going to be interested in your department. But on the back side of that, we can track everything. And this is what you need to go back to your city council, your mayors, and justify the budget and justify the spend in there. You need to be able to back up, hey, I got a return off this campaign of 1,000 people for this spend. But going back to your example, I need 12,000 people interested. So I need this kind of an outreach. I need this kind of a reach out into the community to get enough interest to fill my, let's say, 100 openings. And we want to give you all that information so it makes sense to everybody looking at your campaign as to what you're doing every step of the way and why you're doing it.
Yeah, this leads into a bigger question is if somebody is talking to you about helping you with recruiting, these are the answers you need to know, Doug. Like you don't promise impressions. You say, this is how many people we're going to send you. That's a big difference from what every other company will do, where with a dollar figure, you're going to get this many people. That's why when I say you can fix anyone's issues, no matter what their problems are, they're down 1,000 or down 2,000, from all your campaigns exactly what that costs. Now, an agency may have to sort of spend that money over a 1 or 2 year period, depending on the problem, but you can definitely tell them approximately how many people they'll get for the money. No one else is doing that in this industry. And I want people to be aware of that. If somebody wants to help you with recruiting, make them tell you for this much money. For instance, let's say you're going to give somebody $25,000. Don't just let them say, yeah, we're going to run recruiting ads for you. Make them tell you, well, how many people are you going to send us for that money? If they can't answer that, Doug, I'm thinking you're going to say run away, right?
Yeah, I definitely have some concerns with that if they can't give me an idea of how that's going to help me in the end. And help isn't meaning they're going to have people go look at my website. That doesn't convert into the interest, the application, the hire like it needs to. You need to take your information, your department branding, your culture out into your ad is out into this space, and it needs to be tracking down people interested in your department and getting them the necessary information to take the next steps to show their interest in your department, get contacted by a recruiter, and get in the process so we can start vetting them and getting them down the road towards a new hire.
It's good stuff, Doug. Data may not be interesting to people, but if you're going to have successful recruiting, you better know the data. And I appreciate the conversation. Thanks for being on.
All right. Thank you, Travis.